The Meta-Nexus Institute is a global network of scholars, scientists, clergy, and citizens pursuing the constructive engagement of science, religion, philosophy, and the humanities. At colleges, universities, and their communities around the world, we promote interdisciplinary, interinstitutional, and interreligious exploration and education. For more information, visit www.metanexus.net.
So, I think I'm going to treat you to something rather different from the previous presentation. I want to spend a word about the context of this paper in which it has been written. I'm presently working on a postdoctoral research project in philosophy of religion and theology at the Department of Theology at Zurich University in Switzerland. And this project is very much work in progress. So I could imagine that the paper I'm going to give will testify to this, and you can remind me or even correct me on the relevant points and gaps and holes. The project is about a comparison of different ideas of divine transcendence as they impinge on social and political philosophy, especially as regards our conceptions of social diversity and pluralism. Of course, this is a wide issue. So I concentrate on the work of two important but much understudied philosophical thinkers of the last century, whose work promises to bring light to these issues. That's on the one hand Dutch philosopher and legal theorist Herman Dooyeweerd, whose name was heard actually in his conference a few times so far, and the German-American political philosopher Erich Voegelin, or Voegelin, that will be in German. Now this is just to give you the scope, the context of my work. Now today, or in this paper, I'm going to narrow down my focus on two such ideas of divine transcendence. Call it on the one hand the ancient Greek, and on the other hand the biblical notion or idea of divine transcendence. And I'm interested at the question how these two ideas relate according to the two thinkers, Dooyeweerd and Voegelin. The central headings on which Voegelin and Dooyeweerd subsume the relation between the biblical and the ancient Greek idea of transcendence are antithesis, synthesis, and tension. And I want to spend some time on what they mean and how they work and what's their problem. So both Dooyeweerd and Voegelin were thinkers of transcendence. Perhaps the spirit animating their work can be captured in a line taken from Voegelin's autobiographical reflections, where he says, and this is quote number 1 on your handout. So Voegelin says, "Man does not exist out of himself, but out of the divine ground of all reality." And I think that fits both Dooyeweerd and Voegelin very well, their direction, where they're going. Both of them orient their philosophical thought to cosmic order or a divine order of creation, and oppose it to the construction of immanentist ersatz order. It bears emphasis saying that both underwent unpleasant first-hand experiences with Nazi ideology and power, so that's a further motivation for them to go in this direction. Attunement to the divine order of creation is more than just a recurrent theme in their work. I'd like to argue it's an organizing notion for both of them. But this creates a difficulty for many of us today, for it is almost inevitable that the notion of cosmic order brings to mind the static vision of a hierarchically organized society or community patterned on a presumed natural order. Given its long history of use and abuse, the term creation order has for many become synonymous with the idea of a cosmic engineering assembling ontological rungs and ontic structures into a single tyrannical whole called being, and its correlate science or pseudoscience called metaphysics. But one should take in the irony here, because rather than covering the projection of some contingent political or economic order or discourse into the realm of eternal ideas, The recourse to transcendence precisely serves in our two thinkers to relativize the various immanent isms competing for faith. Transcendence for Dooyeweerd and Voegelin is the very opposite of a world closing in on itself. If the place of God, the divine, is left vacant, something else is sure to take it, and we might add with disastrous consequences. Says Voegelin, and this is quote number 2 on your handout, I found out that a political theory, especially when it was to be applicable to the analysis of ideologies, had to be based on classic and Christian philosophy. So here we have the coupling of classic, ancient Greek, and Christian philosophy. Setting him on a rather different track, Dooyeweerd's moment of intellectual and spiritual reorientation is worth quoting at greater length. This is number 3, where Dooyeweerd says, originally, I was strongly under the influence, first of the Neo-Kantian philosophy, later on of Husserl's phenomenology. The great turning point in my thought was marked by the discovery of the religious root of thought itself, whereby a new light was shed on the failure of all attempts, including my own, to bring about an inner synthesis between the Christian faith and philosophy, which is rooted in faith in the self-sufficiency of human reason. I came to understand the central significance of the heart, repeatedly proclaimed by Holy Scripture to be the religious root of human existence. The religious root of human existence. On the basis of this central Christian point of view, I saw the need of a revolution in philosophical thought of a very radical character. So what are the main implications of our thinkers' respective reorientations towards, on the one hand, classic and Christian philosophy, and on the other hand, this Christian approach, which he symbolizes by the notion of the heart, as the religious center of personhood? Let us examine the case of Herman Dooyeweerd first. His discovery of the biblical idea of the heart as the center of human personality must be seen against the background of a scientific and philosophical culture in which the concrete human self had been divided up into a complex of empirically abstracted functions, for instance, biological, psychological, cognitive functions, held together by some higher philosophical abstraction, most notably reason. Harking back to ancient philosophical thought, modern rationalist philosophers had thoroughly identified the human person with what for Dooyeweerd is just one aspect of our experience of the world and ourselves, i.e., the rational analytical aspect. So in this rationalist perspective, other aspects were integral to the human self, just insofar as reason could form an idea of their unity within itself. And as you can imagine, this means that the unity of the concrete self is at the complete mercy of theoretical thinking in philosophy and science. So there's a huge gap there. It's true that critical reflection of theoretical thought on its own activity could, in modern philosophy, no longer find expression in the ancient symbolism of a microcosm, reflecting the divine order of the macrocosmos. Rather, in the context of modern philosophy, reason had to take the role of nature's lawgiver upon itself, and this is fully epitomized in Kant's philosophy, where theoretical reason becomes the actual lawgiver of reality. As a consequence, the human person was envisaged as both subject to the order of reality, as well as its very source and origin. This raises a quandary, and Dooyeweerd spends a lot of pages and a lot of energy to bring this out forcefully. The question is, well, how can the law of creation both bind and arise from autonomous persons without dividing them up? We have subjects, we are subject to the laws, and on the other hand, we are their creators. So how does this sum up? The basic antinomy of all theoretical solutions or attempted solutions, following Dooyeweerd, is at the root of a century-long dialectical process of spiritual disintegration. Having compromised or abrogated the integral idea of creation from its center, modern philosophical thought is tossed to and fro between the deification and utter defamation of human reason as the source of order. After his turning point, Dooyeweerd thus sought to ground his thinking in a biblically inspired idea of creation, according to which everything that exists or claims legitimate validity is subject to God's laws in nature and norms in culture and history. Dooyeweerd challenges his interlocutors to lay their cards on the table and articulate the faith orienting their own philosophical thought. For him, driving all theoretical endeavor is a ground motive, or as we may call it, a fides quaerens intellectum, a faith seeking understanding. In Dooyeweerd's case, the fides is oriented towards creation as the meaning totality, in which each thing points to everything else and everything points to their common origin in God, who revealed himself in Jesus Christ, through whom all things are created and made new. So in this vision, nothing has independent existence or validity. As he puts it for short, and this is quote number 4, meaning is the mode of being of all that is created. As we will see, this orientation towards meaning as the being of creation puts Dooyeweerd in close proximity to Voegelin. But it also has irritated critics for the seeming non-realism and expressivism driving it. We may ask, and critics have asked, can the rejection of mind-independent substances and laws in creation really preserve the truth that the world is not of our own making? Why is this not some other version of the meaning idealism that Dooyeweerd wants to overcome along with all philosophical reductionisms, isolating one aspect of creation and turning this aspect into its inner core and essential being of all there is? So I think Dooyeweerd would reply at this point saying that creation is indeed oriented towards human subjectivity. But this does not imply anthropocentrism or the sense that creation is there just for us. It rather means that a faithful disclosure of creation as a meaning totality is a human attitude and task bound by creational norms of stewardship founded in the very order of things. Anthropology and cosmology are for Dooyeweerd therefore inextricably intertwined. His theory of modal aspects, about which we have already heard some things, or some of us have, pivotal to this whole philosophical project, starts from the idea that all levels of reality or aspects of creation are reflected in the human person. However, humans aren't fully determined by any aspect of creation or combination thereof. Humans actively function in all these aspects and can mediate between the extremes of creation because they exceed the cosmos and direction of its divine ground. Indeed, the spiritual or pistic aspect, pistic is from the Greek pistis, meaning faith, so the pistic aspect opens up human existence in direction of a beyond of the cosmos, a supposed or true origin, or arche. Without this pull of transcendence, argues Dooyeweerd, it would not be possible to frame an idea of the temporal cosmos or experienced reality as a limited or immanent whole in the first place. Now, just what direction the sense of divine transcendence takes in human life makes the whole difference of who we are and what kind of world we live in. It also co-determines what we will accept as rational in science and philosophy. So let us move on to Erich Voegelin. At the heart of his political philosophy is a philosophy of being. He says, and this is quote number 6 on your handout, philosophy is the love of being through love of the divine being as the source of its order. The logos of being is the object proper of philosophical inquiry. For Voegelin, the history of humankind is a drama played out on the stage of being. In this drama, humans are not the only actors. God and humans, world and society, are the four partners, as he calls them, in the primordial community of being. That's another technical term to him. The primordial community of being, being composed of these four spheres of being or partners. So being is here envisaged in a social metaphor. And this is crucial. This is a crucial point, as it is for Dooyeweerd, who has the notion of a root community, of an original root community, by which he pretty much expresses the same idea. Moreover, for Voegelin too, humankind rises beyond the cosmos. He says, this is quote number 7, Plato was so acutely aware of man's consubstantiality but non-identity with divine reality that he developed a special symbol for man's experience of intermediate status between the human and the divine. He calls the consciousness of this status the metaxi, the in-between of existence. So here we come across a Platonic term that is of central importance to Voegelin. And it simply denotes the community of being in which the irreducible significance of each partner begins to manifest itself in human consciousness. The movement of differentiating consciousness is therefore normatively characterized by an increasing tension between the various spheres of being, that is, the divine, the cosmic, societal, and individual. In fact, however, the emergence of differentiating consciousness is not a linear process. Human struggle for attunement to divine order is both characterized by leaps in being as well as lapses and derailments. One of these derailments being, of course, the very far end of the chain in 20th century totalitarian ideologies. So Voegelin gives an extensive analysis of this process of differentiating consciousness over hundreds of pages of historical analysis, and I think overall we have to say that he did a nice job, a good job, although some of his results are pretty much dated today. But anyway, as he starts out against the background of ancient cosmological civilizations and their symbolisms, there occurred, independently of each other, two breakthroughs, leaps or spiritual outbursts. Within this process of differentiating consciousness, the first two points of reference are these two outbursts. So on the one hand, we have the pneumatic revelation in Israel, and on the other hand, the noetic revelation in Hellas, Greece. So the first outburst is at the origin of Israel. The discussion of Israel in a modern political philosophy, it should be noted here, was something of an anomaly. But here's the rationale for its inclusion, and I quote, "Revelation creates history as the inner form of human existence in the present under God." This is quite a tight sentence, so I'll read it out again. Revelation creates history as the inner form of human existence in the present under God. Israel thus comes to stand for the break with the ancient cosmological civilizations and their symbolisms of eternal recurrence. With the leap of Israel comes the experience of being suspended from a source of meaning outside the political community of which one finds oneself to be a part originally. And of course, the symbol for this original, primordial community in Israel's case is Egypt, out of which it made an exodus. So what has become of Voegelin's primordial community of being in and through this first outburst, spiritual outburst as he calls it? Well, it is as if there are now four characters: God, the world, humans, and society in search of each other. The experience of a people under God, pressing as it were toward the experience of one humanity under God, is never fully there at any given point in time. In other words, the experience has eschatological drive. For Voegelin, Israel's exodus from itself and beyond all territorial ambitions has indeed been the condition for it to become the vanguard and representative of a new humanity under God, as opposed to the cosmological civilizations or Egypt. I have reserved discussion of Voegelin's account of the other Hellenic spiritual outburst for the last section in order to directly confront it with Dooyeweerd's idea of a religious ground motive. For it is here that real tension between the two thinkers surfaces, with no guarantee of release. Why? Voegelin has no doubts that the two motivating centers of experience, Israel and Hellas, ultimately belong to one and the same human consciousness. The divine ground is one, and so is the in-between of the divine-human encounter. The spheres of influence of the two spiritual centers cannot be separated out, according to Voegelin, along the later theological division of reason and revelation. That has, of course, been a common motive, doing revelation belonging to Israel, reason belonging to Greece. We're all familiar with that, I guess. If that's the case, these two poles, reason and revelation, need not even be made complementary along the same distinction of reason and revelation as in the symbolism of, for example, grace perfecting nature. For Voegelin, the symbols discovered in the process of philosophizing always had a double status, human and divine. So he makes no bones about his view of Western Christian theology, Catholic or Reformed. This is quote number 11, where he says that the double status of the symbols which express the movement in the metaxy, the differentiating consciousness, has been badly obscured in Western history by Christian theologians who have split the two components of symbolic truth, monopolizing under the title of revelation for Christian symbols the divine component, while assigning under the title of natural reason to philosophical symbols the human component. Strikingly enough, Dooyeweerd, the Christian Calvinist Reformed philosopher, fully concurs with this assessment. But just because the two spiritual centers, Athens and Jerusalem, for short, are of a religious or ultimate nature, they each claim the totality of the in-between or horizon of human experience. The Dutch thinker thus pulls his philosophical weight to demonstrate the ultimate incompatibility or religious antithesis between the ancient Greek and biblical ground motives, or ideas of transcendence, as they work themselves out in our human thinking. For him, it's a clean either-or. Philosophy has to be reformed as everything else in life, according to one or the other motive. Back to Voegelin. If the break with cosmological civilization leads to God's search for man in Israel, it takes the reverse direction in Hellas. So this is a graphic illustration of how he thinks that after the first spiritual outburst, there's a God who is in search of man. God calls man on Mount Sinai, for instance. In the other case, it takes the reverse direction. So here is man that is revealed to himself as the being who is in search of the divine ground of being. Philosophy for him, then, is the name of the mind or nous activity in and through which this search comes to reflective self-awareness in thinkers like Plato and Aristotle. And he says in quote number 13, at its core, human nature is the openness of questioning knowing and knowing questioning about the ground. Through this openness, beyond any contents, images, and models whatsoever, order flows from the ground of being into the being of man. So in Hellas, the motivating center of experience, that is at the heart of philosophy, puts the polis and its traditional gods into second position. Rather than denying them, the gods, all right of existence, Plato, with the help of many predecessors, makes the gods dependent upon an origin that transcends them. Now, Dooyeweerd's characterization of the Hellenic ground motive picks up on exactly this point. Since Greek thinkers lacked the revelation of the transcendent origin of creation, and thus the idea of a non-demiurgic creation, meaning it's a creatio ex nihilo and not just the forming of something out of pre-existent matter, for instance. So since they lacked the revelation of the transcendent origin of creation, they were in principle unable to reconcile the divinized forces of nature, matter, and culture, form. And stripping the number of gods down to one doesn't help here, for the divine origin has still to be envisaged in terms of either being or in terms of becoming, with nothing to mediate between them. Thus the divine ground lacks radical unity. So this is Dooyeweerd's criticism of the Hellenic ground motive and the cause of his rejection of it. It is simultaneously torn into the direction of the form motive, expressing itself in the Olympian religion, the religion of form, measure, and harmony, which rested essentially upon the deification of the cultural aspect of Greek society, on the one hand, and into the direction of the matter motive, driving the cults of Mother Earth with its ever-flowing stream of life and its threatening ananke, meaning fate. So, as Dooyeweerd sees it, heaven and earth are in constant strife within this idea. For him, there is nothing in Hellenic philosophy and its later developments warranting our hope to find there an integral, non-dialectical starting point for theoretical and scientific thought. No amount of resymbolization or differentiating consciousness will help you transform the religious tension, the ultimate religious tension, into a humanly manageable theoretical dialectic. In his words, number 15, genuine Christian philosophy requires a radical rejection of the super-theoretical presuppositions and axioms of immanence philosophy in all its forms. It has to seek its own philosophic paths. It cannot permit itself to accept within its own cadre of thought problems of immanence philosophy which originate from the dialectic ground motives of the latter. But I want to immediately add here, it is easy to misread Dooyeweerd if one isolates passages like this. Of course, he doesn't mean to break off philosophical and scientific conversation with unbelievers, other believers, and so on. And Reformational philosophy, the tradition he's been a founder of, as a whole, has not fallen prey to self-insulating tendencies over the years of its existence. Because even for Dooyeweerd, philosophy and intellectual inquiry is the testing and contesting of ideas and theories across boundaries of political, national, confessional, and so on. Theoretical activity, where it deserves that name, is governed by its own integral laws. As all modal laws governing human activity, they are ultimately rooted in the divine order of creation, no matter how much the latter may be repressed in and through human consciousness. Still, and I fully concur with this conclusion, we should not commit ourselves to the fiction of a neutral space of autonomous reason, especially if we happen to be a cultural and philosophical majority. We should not assume our perspective to be the default position beyond all perspectives. Rightly understood, then, Dooyeweerd's antithesis is not even the sort of logical boundary dividing doctrines, positions, or propositional claims to truth of theology, in theology, for instance, or philosophy of religion. The antithesis is of a radical nature, meaning that it cuts across the self of each human being, believers and none or other believers alike. The antithesis undoubtedly manifests itself in the rich tapestry of social interactions and conceptual categories that are part and parcel of human life. But it never manifests itself in univocal fashion. Hence, it cannot be mapped onto some factual or conceptual line of division without thereby putting into relief the non-ultimate nature of the latter. We may not at present see whether these lines of division, either factual or conceptual, can in fact or even should be overcome, but so much may be attributed to our own present limitations. How then do we know that there is such an antithesis if we can't observe it? The answer I want to propose is, well, we don't. But unless we assume it to be there, we will treat all competing faiths as rationally deficient variants of our own life orientation. Paradoxically enough, Dooyeweerd's idea of antithesis preserves the integrity of other faiths, even while taking an uncompromising stand on the Christian truth as he understands it. Look at it this way. A faith or ethos worthy of its name has the inherent tendency to create its own encompassing context of rational interpretation of all there is. But a question immediately must be pressed further. Can the ultimate antithesis between, say, Athens and Jerusalem be thought at all? Surely there is no sense in subscribing to a contentless idea directing our lives and minds, be it ever so conducive of dialogue. Here's a seeming impasse. Unless some ground motive has specific content ascribed to it, we are not even able to know how it differs from another one. But if that content is itself non-ultimate, because reflecting human discrimination, finite and ever distorted by sin, so is the antithesis. I'm rushing towards an end. I'd say that, at least in this respect, Voegelin's approach is more forthcoming. For him, Plato was aware of the double status of human beings as both human and divine, neither confounding nor separating the two natures. Only within the orbit of a literalized, you could say fundamentalist, context of pneumatic revelation, the tension between the two risks to be lost in one direction or the other. Philosophy for Voegelin is the guardian of this tension in human consciousness. It must look to it that religious symbols such as Dooyeweerd's absolute boundary between human and divine do not turn into doctrines, making us forgetful of the primordial porosity, as he calls it, between the divine and human partners in the community of being. So we must keep the tension. That's his message. In the end, we have to ask ourselves the question what to make of the notion of a double revelation. Not only double or multiple manifestations of revelation, but double sources of revelation. Voegelin supplies the original content of human experience of God, world, man, and society without recourse to Jewish or Christian documents. He relies on his own philosophical vocabulary gained from close interaction with Plato and Aristotle. And I'd suggest that this way of proceeding for Dooyeweerd is not an available option. For him, true faith is response to the Word of God and thus inseparably bound to the Scriptures, the biblical Scriptures, even if not exhausted by them. He insists that religious faith in the biblical sense doesn't lack anything without Hellenic or any other kind of theoria. Defending the substance of naive, that is, pre-theoretical faith against theoretical supersessionism and its claim to higher noetic truth has been a strong motive driving Reformational philosophy. So in this paper, I have tried to shortly analyze Dooyeweerd's and Voegelin's ideas of divine transcendence, biblical and ancient Greek, as well as providing some of their reasons for the presumed antithesis on the one hand, or tensional unity on the other hand, holding between the Greek and the biblical versions of these ideas. I thank you for your attention.